So things like ring shopping, moving in together, you becoming pregnant, taking a trip together, getting engaged, entering into a relationship with them. You get the idea. For some avoidants, entering into a relationship is a trigger point. And therein lies the most interesting fact with regards to trigger points. Every avoidant is different with what threatens them. In other words, there's a different threshold that each person has that's unique to them. We know from experience that one avoidant can be cool with the idea of taking a trip together for the weekend, while another will get completely set off by it. The theme is always the same though. Any perceived threat of their self-reliance has the potential of being a trigger point. Now I'd like to switch gears here for a moment and talk a little bit about the expectations of men. Now, as you can imagine, we here on Ex-Boyfriend Recovery are ardent fans of the no contact. Now, the no contact rule refers to a period of time where you cut off all conceivable communication with an ex after a breakup. Now, most of our clients expect that when they use the no contact rule on their exes are going to come beg for them back or reach out to them at the very least. But our research has shown that that isn't the case at all. According to a poll done in 2020 by us, 62% of our clients said that their exes did not reach out to them at all during no contact. They were the ones that had to reach out first. This makes sense as it tracks with what we know about avoidance, which most of our clients' exes are. According to Free to Attach, one of the foremost authorities on avoidant research, often avoidants won't initiate contact with their exes, and they rarely unilaterally initiate reuniting because it creates uncomfortable feelings of vulnerability, and they can feel they don't know how to go about fixing things. Yet perhaps the most interesting paradox about avoidance is that this period where they avoid you doesn't really last forever. With enough time, they start painting you as the phantom ex. That still doesn't mean they'll reach out to you, but they employ selective memory and start remembering the good times and forgetting the bad times. Once again, pulling from Free to Attach, avoidants are free to long for an ex once that person is unavailable out of the relationship and typically out of contact, so they are untouched by the actual engagement and their deactivation systems aren't triggered, revealing their long suppressed attachment and switching their operating attachment wound from a fear of engulfment to a fear of abandonment. But the key here is time. You need to give a man enough time to get to this place emotionally where they think you have moved on, and then they will allow themselves time to fawn over you from afar. That doesn't mean they're going to reach out to you, but that means that if you end up reaching out to them, they'll be a lot more likely to respond to you because they've painted you a little bit differently in their minds. Of course, most of our clients don't ever allow that much time to go by because it's scary and it's at odds with their own anxious attachment styles, but that's a whole different topic. But really, I think it all boils down to understanding the major differences between how men and women handle breakups. Now, I've touched on this in depth in many articles before, but I figured it's worth repeating here. In 2015, Binghamton University started looking at the differences between how men and women handle breakups. They found that women tend to be more negatively affected by breakups, reporting higher levels of both physical and emotional pain. Women tended to recover more fully and came out emotionally stronger. Men, on the other hand, never fully recover. They simply move on. Now, what does that mean? Men simply move on. I think it's a reference to the fact that most men never deal with the breakup. They're happy to avoid it or simply use another person to distract themselves from the complicated feelings associated with it. Men report feelings of anger and engage in more self-destructive behaviors than women. Women, in comparison, frequently feel more depressed and participate in more social, affiliative behaviors than men. Women's behaviors could be argued to be more constructive strategies as a result of their tendency to preserve relationships, whereas men choose destructive strategies for maintaining their own self-esteem. It's not that men don't feel a breakup. It's that most try to prevent themselves from feeling it because it hurts that much. Now, just because I'm talking about it here doesn't necessarily mean that your ex-boyfriend is falling victim to this. Remember, there are exceptions to every rule, but generally speaking, I've found that stereotypes tend to be true when it comes to breakups. So what's the big takeaway from this? Well, I think in general, men are avoiders when it comes to the complicated emotional resonance of breakups. They want to avoid the pain rather than face the pain. That doesn't necessarily mean that your ex is avoiding the pain. Remember, not every ex is avoidant, but those that are a lot more likely to avoid pain